I would kind of push forward and kindly invite Jošt Franko to join us. I think that we tackled already a very important topic, which is the role of art within financial capitalism and the way of what kind of society it is cultural policy, even if the cultural policy, as you said, is non-existing, is existing, and is basically not attaching to the structures that were, and it's basically bringing the state and the institutions and the public much further away. Jošt Franko, a photographer, an artist and researcher who with his work very much dragged into, let's say, a taboo that was within contemporary art, especially after the 2015-2016, the so-called Balkan route and the violence of image. A discussion which goes on from Helsinki Tribunal and is very urgent in terms of art as evidence. So Jošt Franko, again back in a way to Bosnia and Herzegovina, again back to avoid memory without evidence. Thank you, Jošt.
Yeah, art as evidence, I think this is something we can dwell on later on, but I'll just start and we can come back to the discussion. The feeling of Europe is the feeling of sans domicile, of being without a home. There's a big wish with me to erase some hours of the day. I think this is how the homeless start drinking. They want to erase some hours of the day. With me, I wish to erase from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. because these are very sad hours. I've nothing to do. I can't do anything and everything is up for imagination. And so I wish I had a right to study, a right to work, a right to sleep, and a right to keep on living. A baby doesn't have to prove his existence because his rights are, as they say in French, essentiels. They come from nature. But after 38 years, I still have to prove that I exist. And all the people in this refugee camp are like me. This is the case of being a migrant. So these are the words of Ziad Abdullawi from November last year. Ziad is a friend and a person on the move who was at the time when this article, part of this article was written, awaiting a decision of the Swiss government on his asylum request. I met him in Velika Kladuša while he was quoting Karl Marx on the streets of this small Bosnian town bordering with Croatia, and just as he was about to embark on his 15th attempt at the time to cross the so-called Balkan refugee route in order to reach European Union, which only months later he successfully did with the help of what he called brave local feminists. I met Ziad while working on my ongoing artistic project, which is collected under the title The Migrating Image, which is focusing on topics and issues such as migrations or forced migrations, displacement, workers' rights, counter-narrative, and communal deliberation of precarious lives. The Migrating Image uses artistic means as a form of engagement with social issues and focuses on various still active refugee camps in former Yugoslavia, which are housing refugees from the 1990s, as well as on spaces of forced migrations in the broader region of the Balkans. So the project attempts to put to the forefront and to document current social and political reality of the displaced and exiled individuals and communities, and kind of strives to find a way for the various still active refugee centers or community centers which are sheltering people on the move, or forests which are sheltering people on the move, to become spaces of collaboration or of somewhat communal deliberations. So the ongoing artistic research project considers refugee settlements as spaces of existing situated knowledge, of existing counter-narrative, and of parallel histories. And it strives to act as a podium for the often complex refugee histories whose lives illuminate interconnections of colonization, war, and global social change. So as a means of collecting the research and as a way to explore the consequences of war that have ravaged in the Balkans and of forced migrations as the outcome of that very conflict, the migrating image relies on photography, moving image, text, and collaborations, and it specifically tries to engage with the aftermath of conflict as something that Okwe and Vezor deliberated that the documentary form per se very rarely displays. And for Envezor, that is the ultimate fate of people who were once at the podium of worldwide events. And to do so, in as much in a world of professed post-truth and the general crisis of documentary culture, which I think we can all experience, especially in the case of Palestine or Ukraine, but we can return to that. The research argues and stands on the position of John Roberts and his seminal work, Photography and Its Violations, that, and I quote, "Photography can only arrive, and perhaps more importantly, should only arrive late," end of quote. And only through this necessary lateness of the image, the research and the aftermath can be brought into an extended discursive life and engage with the social issues it intends to explore. Through such quote-unquote necessary lateness, the project we're working on proposes to expand documentary practice into a collaborative and communal strategy to keep returning to the scene and re-examine it over a longer period of time. To elaborate further on this thought, in Photography and Its Violations, Roberts claims that, I'm quoting now, "Arriving on time, in fact, may be the most inauspicious of times, the most premature of times, for what is on time in its expectations of directness and clarity and truth, and what in photography is known as the decisive moment, conspire with the preformatting and the generic, and therefore with what is already known as dead time, with politics as spectacle, with the non-symbolic," end of quote. Throughout its process of documenting, collecting, and creating ongoing histories, the project responds and counters the dominant and state narratives about refugees that often depict them as passive victims of some sort of decontextualized violence that just further marginalizes their position within society, and throughout the process of working with communities of displaced, tries to create a platform which would accommodate and present refugee counter-narratives. And as mentioned earlier, the migrating image articulates the latter, or tries to articulate the latter, through a series of phototext publications, specifically through an appropriation of newspaper form and format. Examples of the latest work on Memory Without Evidence I'm sharing today on screen, and it's just about to hit the printing press. So a newspaper format, which is a more and more disappearing form of storytelling and has historically garnished the documentary form and put to the forefront stories of the marginalized, is here, as mentioned earlier, offering to present a collection of parallel and invisible histories, of unspoken and unheard narratives, and strives to preserve and garnish heritage and culture of those who were left out of the body politic. Through such a form, the ongoing artistic research refers to the phototext documentary practice of the 1930s and 40s, examples like Ernst Friedrich's Krieg dem Kriege, Dorothea Lange and Paul Taylor's American Exodus, James Segui and Walker Evans's Let Us Now Praise Famous Men, or Bertolt Brecht's War Primer, as well as like the general works of the German worker photographers movements and the American Photo League. as well as contemporary examples of phototext practice, such as Alan Sekula, Martha Rossler, Jim Goldberg, and so on, and also strives and tries to look upon documentary practice, video-assistic works, and community-related projects from artists like Ursula Biemann, Yasmine Zabach, Belinda Kazim-Kaminski, for example. So the previous edition of the newspaper, collaborative newspaper, was titled Keine Chance, and it brought to print many lost, unspoken, or unheard narratives of displaced communities in the Balkan Peninsula, and was an attempt to acknowledge those who became stranded in the outskirts of European Union while they were looking for safer or better opportunities in the EU. And the current edition touches a bit more on the question of belonging or longing for a sense of community, because as Muhammad Abdul Monaim, a Syrian-Palestinian poet who is collaborating on the newspaper, claimed that, I'm quoting, "As refugees, all of our histories are lost, and we keep a memory without evidence," end of quote. So a sense to belong is often a common thread in this very fluid and very diverse community of displaced people, together with whom we organized workshops where we deliberated the idea of refuge, of asylum, of lost histories, and of often very brutal means by which their movements were deterred. So A Memory Without Evidence, this second edition of the newspaper, will be co-published by ZRC and Museum of Modern Art, and works together with a community of displaced people once they manage to traverse the Balkan route, and brings forward the stories of people who have traded their imprisonment behind the razor wire for the captivity of the bureaucratic political asylum system of the EU, and tries to direct the attention to the issues of attritional bureaucratic violence of these asylum politics and procedures. Through various forms of essays, of poetry, and of written deliberations, oral history, or other forms of writing, the idea was to collaborate, as I said, with the often very fluid community of displaced people, because few of the people we started working with have stayed in Slovenia, so we were able to pursue this project together through a longer period. But through such a means, the project engages with displaced narratives as something of an ongoing history, and it understands these narratives as being always incomplete. And within such a durational experience, the migrating image and the latest project, A Memory Without Evidence, proposes to articulate and to visualize what James Agee called a cruel radiance of what is. So throughout its artistic examination and collaborative deliberations, this artistic project questions and deliberates how to structure documentary imagery today to act as an agent of new potentiality, of history and historical absences, of political and social imagination, and of new possibilities. It questions how to organize an artistic project and use collaborative means to denounce the violence and brutality of, in this case, European asylum politics and procedures, which just condemn people to the margins of visibility, and how the process of creating an artistic project, and in our case, a collaborative newspaper edition, can work to counter such a narrative and become agent of visibility, of existence, and empowerment instead. Ultimately, the migrating image currently delves into the question which Veronica Tello pointed out in her book Counter-Memorial Aesthetics, and asks how art can contest the erasure of refugee experiences from collective memory and understand their place in historical consciousness. Sorry. I'll finish my presentation once again with the deliberations of Ziad and read his closing argument in his text, The Feeling of Europe, which contemplates on his entrapment in an asylum politics and procedures in a Swiss refugee camp. I'm waiting, just waiting, and I'm thinking about my life, how I'm losing my sense of being like this. I left Tunisia, my parents, my roots, after the revolution, which I believe has failed. I left Tunisia to finish my revolution and find my intellectual body inside myself. But I didn't find it in Europe. Where is the Europe of luminous ideas? The authorities say that my journey in Switzerland is provisorisch. My stay was just recently temporarily extended. I would certainly like to stay in Switzerland, but they make sure to tell us every day, you're not Swiss. Don't compare to us, you don't have the same rights as we do. You know, they tell us the truth. And I need this kind of realism in my life. It's very dry and very cold, but I need it. Every day the system here explains that you're not Swiss. For me, this is kind of maturity. Before I came to Europe, I had faith in the kind of leftist naivete of human rights. I believe that all people are born free and equal before law. But real life is obviously not about human rights, at least not for everyone. When you become mature, you start to understand that. Human rights are a kind of utopist idea. In reality, they're a capricious concept. Human rights of some people are worth more than of others. Life is more complicated than the Geneva Convention. And being a migrant made me understand that. Waiting, Europe has finally killed the revolution inside me. Thanks.